So I've zoomed in as close as I can so that you can see just the paper and my palette here. And I'll talk about the colors that I'm mixing as we go. And I'll be sure to have all the mixing done in these two sections right here so you can see everything that I'm doing. So the first thing I do is dip my brush in the water. Now I'm going to start on the painting, and the first part I'm going to start with is the sky at the top. So I'm going to mix ultramarine blue and titanium white. And just start putting that in right at the top. One of the secrets to working with gouache is that you don't want to use too much water. The reason is the paper acts like a sponge and it will soak up the pigment. And because gouache has larger granules of pigment than watercolor, it won't soak in that much, but enough of the pigment will soak in, and then some will sit on top of the paper, and it'll end up looking kind of mottled, or it'll just look like it has a texture that's not pretty to look at. Hard to describe, but anyway, you don't want that to happen. If it does happen, you can paint over it because you can layer paints with gouache. But the more you paint with them, you'll realize you use very little water, and you want that paint to sit on top of the paper. Because gouache is made with pigment that's more granulated, it also has reflective qualities. And that's another reason that you want to make sure that the pigment sits on top of the paper. Now, one of the downsides of that is that gouache is also very delicate. So after you finish a section like this and it dries, if you want to go back over it, you can. But if you drop accidentally, like just a little drop of water or something, it'll make a mark, and then you have to touch that up or paint over it. So that's the downside of having all the paint sitting on top of the paper, and it's not permanent. Like if acrylic sits on top of the paper and you drop water on it, it doesn't matter because it's acrylic and it dries and it's permanent, but gouache is not. So it makes it a little tricky to work with. So the next color I want to mix is that darker gray that you can see in the picture, and I'm going to use ultramarine and lilac and also some vermilion, a little bit more, and a little more ultramarine. So I want this shade of violet. It's kind of a violet gray. I'm going to lighten it slightly with some more lilac. I want it to be, I would say it's about 2.5 or 2 value shades darker than the blue. So my idea with this painting is to have the sky be the place where I've got really expressive brush strokes, because I'm locked into the lighthouse. The lighthouse is just the lighthouse, and so I'm going to paint that fairly realistic looking. But within any painting that I do, I like to have some areas where my style or part of the painting is sort of abstract. So I get a little bit of abstraction, I get a little impressionism and a little realism, and to me that makes the whole of the artwork more interesting. Now I just painted up over some of the top of the lighthouse. No big deal, because these paints are opaque, and even though they're delicate, you can paint over and layer with these. So no worries, we'll put that back in a little while. I'm mixing up a little more of this blue-gray now. So same color mixture, ultramarine, titanium white, lilac, vermilion. And I want it to be a little bit different. I want this pass to be a little more of a blue-gray. And you can see how I'm moving this brush along really kind of, loose, big brush strokes. This is a nice brush because it's pointed, but it also has a nice flat side, so I can make big wide brush strokes if I want to. And one thing you'll notice I'm doing as I'm painting is I'm covering up these little white spots. In a watercolor painting, I often like to leave those. It kind of gives the painting a little bit of sparkle. But in gouache, I like to cover those up. Now I'm adding some titanium white to the same mixture, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in down towards the bottom, because I'm planning to put another lighter passage of this pretty, like a band of this pretty gray, blue, violet across here. And I'm having it pass behind the lighthouse. Even though there's a lot of sea spray back here, I want to have this behind it. And I'm going to rinse my brush again. I try to rinse my brush really well between color mixtures, especially since the next color that I want to mix up is going to be a salmon color, so completely different from the violet blue gray. So to make the salmon color, I'm going to use vermilion and Naples yellow. And I'm also going to put in some of this deep yellow. Now, if you don't have deep yellow, you can use regular yellow and just add a little more vermilion to it. Just a touch of vermilion plus regular yellow will warm up your yellow. So here's this nice salmon color. When I paint with gouache, I do tend to emphasize the colors a bit more, and this medium really lends itself to making big expressive brush strokes. Just seems to really work well with this style of painting. Now you see I've already run out of white, and that's why I keep these tubes handy, so I can just squeeze out a little bit more quickly and easily. If you take these paints with you while you're traveling, or if you just want to go paint plein air, I recommend buying these clear plastic sleeves. I get mine from just Amazon. They're for sale lots of places. Photography outlets, stores that sell photography equipment will also have them. But each time I finish a painting, I can put it in one of those clear plastic sleeves and seal it. And that's really good because then I know it's protected. Now I'm going to mix up a slightly lighter gray, and this time I'm going to add some magenta. So evening skies are a great opportunity to put bands of beautiful colors, and this photograph is perfect for that. So we've got pinkish gray, bluish gray, a salmon color, and of course we're going to have our really light color in the center. So I'm going to bring this all the way over here. And behind the lighthouse. So why paint the sky first? Well, you can see how much I keep bumping into the lighthouse. It's better to paint the background first and then paint the foreground. Not always, but for sure in this case, because this is a big vertical intersecting all of these horizontal bands. And if you paint the lighthouse first and then you're afraid to paint too close to it, you'll end up with little brush strokes that kind of come up really close to it, and then you have to be very careful of your edges and so on. For me right now, it doesn't matter if I brush up against it and brush into it, because I'm going to paint the lighthouse shades over these colors. So I'm going to take a little bit of this band of color at the bottom here, and let's see, I just want to fill this in right down to the horizon. And I'm going to put some of this color also up here. And I'm going to add some more white to it. And I'm going to add some more yellow. I'm using the deep yellow, titanium white, and the lilac plus the other mixture. And I want to make like a really nice expressive line here, so I'm just kind of setting myself up to do this here. So I just want to brush right over this dark color. And this is the great thing about gouache. Look what you can do. You can brush this beautiful light color right over the gouache where it's dark. So you can paint light over dark. You can paint dark over light. You have that freedom, just like you would with acrylic or oil. In fact, in my experience, I find gouache to be even more opaque than acrylic. Seems like with acrylic, you've got to really work with it for a bit, and the brands vary, and you have to really figure out which colors are more opaque and which ones are more transparent, and get used to how much pigment you need to paint with. Now I want to paint some of the light area here. So I'm going to start, let's see, I better wipe off my palette first. So I'm going to start with lemon yellow. So lemon yellow is a cool yellow, meaning that it moves towards green on the color wheel. The other two yellows move in the other direction towards orange, so they're warmer. So I've mixed this lemon yellow with titanium white, which sort of tames it a little bit. I'm calling this titanium white, but it says it's just white, but I do believe it has titanium in it, titanium dioxide. I hope I'm right about that. So just, if you look at the picture, there's a lot of movement, like, you know, from the center up, where the clouds, the texture of the clouds is really picking up the light rays that are radiating out from the sun. So now I'm adding more titanium white to the yellow, and I'm mimicking some of the movement of the clouds and the light out from the center. And I'm also making my brush strokes pretty light. In other words, the touch is pretty light that I'm using. And that is because I want to take advantage of this cold press paper and the texture of it and pick up some of that texture. And the only way to do that is to make the brush stroke so light that the pigment doesn't get down into the textured part, down into the little holes or depressions in the paper. So just filling in this area here with this nice light, kind of a glowy color. And I'm leaving the white at the center. And I am going to put white paint over it for now, just to help me gauge colors and things throughout the rest of the painting. I'm just leaving the paper white. Now I'm going to pick up some of this deep yellow plus vermilion and some more titanium white. And I'm going to put some of this warmer color underneath. So it's really nice to have that combination of warm and cool. And in this photo, you can see there's a lot of that warm kind of coming down right above that dark layer, this blue here. So it's a nice contrast to have this warm color and the blue, the really cool blue next to each other, but I'm still leaving some of the cool pink showing through. I don't want it to be solid. So as with any other medium that I paint with, I squint down a bit when I'm working with gouache, just to kind of see how my whole composition is turning out. Now I'm going to pick up some more titanium white, and this time I'm going to mix a little regular yellow with it. And I'm going to take some of the water off my brush. I can tell I've got too much. I'm going to put a few brush strokes of that not quite pigmented enough. I'm going to put a few brush strokes of that right around here. I want to make sure I don't have any horizontal lines in the sky, just expressive brush strokes. I'm going to put some white paint right in the middle here, and I'm going to gently blend it out into the yellow with soft brush strokes. Now I'm going to go back and get more white and just make it a little thicker right there in the middle, and a little bit of lemon yellow, and mix that with the white, and I'm going to put some of that right around here just to kind of build it up a little bit. Helps to add to the glow. So that looks really nice. So we may come back to the sky in a little bit, but for now I'm happy with the sky. I want to move down and paint this coastline in the distance. So I'm going to mix lilac plus vermilion plus some deep yellow and cyan blue. So what I want to make is a warm violet. And that's why I'm using vermilion instead of magenta. And I need a little more cyan. Mine's not quite dark enough. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of make some expressive strokes again, because this is the background. And this distant coastline has some trees, so I don't want the top of it to be smooth. I want it to be kind of like this, like a broken edge. So just finish filling in this nice shape. And I'm going to make a line here for the horizon. Just bring that all the way across. You don't have to do that, but I'm doing that. It helps me keep my bearings as to where that is. Now I want to put a couple of highlights on the distant coastline, so I'm going to use this yellow that I already have on my palette, the lemon yellow and titanium white. And I'm going to just put a few marks in here like this of highlights. And I am going to blend this a little bit just because it's in the distance and it's this coastline. I'm just going to take a little water. I have plain water on my brush, and I'm gently softening the bottom edges of the highlight. And having these two different values plus the broken edge is like a visual language that is describing that this is a coastline with some trees and maybe some sea mist and fog and so on in it. Now I want to work on the ocean. So I want to put down a base color. So we're going to have a nice color that's going to be similar to this color of the fog or whatever this is at the end of the horizon down here, and then over it we're going to paint these light yellow and white colors. So I'm going to start with vermilion. I got a little too much cyan there. I'm going to go over here and mix. So vermilion and Naples yellow. And deep yellow. And I'm also going to add some titanium white. It's a little too dark. There we go. I just want to get my shape filled in here. And then we're going to be going back over this with highlights. And I'm going to teach you how to make light brush strokes so that you can create a textured highlight with just a couple of brush strokes to show where the sun is shining on the water. Give it that beautiful late afternoon light sparkle. Just loosely filling in this shape, knowing that the next step when it's dry is going to be to come back over it with some sparkle. I'm going to start working on the rocks. So I'm going to use black Intenso to start with. You've got to be really careful. I just got a little dot of black into my ocean where I didn't want it. And I was able to wipe it out with my finger. Now I'm going to pick up some magenta. And I want to mix magenta and some titanium white into the black color. And I'm just putting in these shapes. We'll put the highlights on later because remember it's gouache. So we can work from dark to light or light to dark. But I want to get this nice deep value established. I'm going to mix up a little more of that. So you can see I've used this same brush for most of the painting. If you don't have one of these brushes, a 1/2 inch flat works, or a number 8 round. There's a lot of options that would work. This just happens to be my new favorite. So I wanted the rocks to have this movement where they come from the center down and they really support this nice vertical lighthouse. Then I have the horizontal bands of color and the horizon. And so I've got the yellow, fanning out towards the top, and then I've got the rocks down at the bottom. And if you look at the photo, you can see that it's like there's some rocks, but there's also some big pieces of cement, and not so pretty, but we can make it pretty when we paint it. In any painting, I like to, as much as possible, I like to get my big shapes down first. So I've gotten the color down for the ocean, and I realize it's sort of unusual to have this deep red in the ocean, but we're going to put lots of sparkle from that evening sun on the water. And I'm going to teach you how to do brush strokes to use the texture of the paper. So before we do that, and before we put the light and shadow on the rocks, I want to get part of the splashing wave blocked in. I want to get the lighthouse blocked in, and I want to get this water down here blocked in. So I'm going to start with the water here, where it's a deep green color. It's like a teal. So the water in the foreground is warm, And one of the things that I really like about this composition is that there's a lot of green here and a lot of red here, and they're complements. And then they're divided by this really cool blue reflection, or excuse me, not a reflection, the cool blue violet in the wave that's coming up. So just a nice arrangement of colors. And I love color. It's one of the reasons I'm a painter. I never get tired of mixing colors and creating new paintings. So I'm mixing up turquoise, cyan. I've mixed a bit of ultramarine in also, and I'm making a nice deep teal. I'm using my this oval brush, and I'm going to make brush strokes like this. So top right to lower left, swing down, lift it up, top left to lower right, swing down and lift it up, and so on. So I'm just going to go through here like this. So I'm not blocking in the whole shape this color, but I'm doing these sort of shapely little brush strokes that remind me a little bit of the movement of water. So now I'm going to mix up a color for the lighthouse. I'm going to use ultramarine blue and lilac. And I'm going to add a little more ultramarine and also a touch of vermilion. There we are, that's a nice color. So I'm going to paint right over the windows because I'm planning to come back later and add those. So just carefully painting this in with this nice blue-gray color. So just gonna come right down through here, and I'm gonna stop where I know that the wave begins. And this little roof here and this little section that sticks out, which is a door that goes into the lighthouse, I'm going to use I'm using black Intenso, and I'm also using permanent rose magenta. So that's going to be a really dark purple. Just like this. And I'm going to put that right down through here. And now I'm going to pop in the windows with the same color. I'm going to add a little more black to it. So one right here at the top and one right here. So I try to make these with just one or two very simple brush strokes. Now I'm going to dip this brush with this dark color into the teal, and I'm going to make this part of the lighthouse. I don't know what you call this, but it's the part right above the cement building that we just put in. And I'm going to paint the inside here. And You want to do this very carefully, and you want to be sure that you don't get any little spots on your painting out here. If you do, you can paint over them, but it's easier if you don't have to do that. And now for the roof. So there's a cute little round thing at the top. I just sort of draw the outsides of it first. And I'm going to paint it all black, and then later I'm going to come in and paint over it with some highlight colors. Now I'm going to get this small brush. This is a number 2. And I'm going to paint the, whatever these are, these supports. So these are just some fine details, but they have to be done in a couple of steps. Now the next step is to make the highlight color. Naples yellow and titanium white. And I'm also going to put a little bit of highlight now right on the roof. And in just a minute, I will zoom in and so you can see close up what these details look like. Now I'm going to make a couple of small details around these windows. A little light brush stroke at the bottom of each one. I'm adding all these details now because it is the center of interest. And I want to get it mostly finished before we work on the rest of the painting. All right, so Naples yellow. And I'm going to go, and titanium white. And I'm going to go right along the side of the building. And I can already tell I need to have a little more titanium white. So I'm still using my number 2 round brush. And I'm going to go right around this roof of this little part that sticks out here. And I'm going to make the inside of the lighthouse nice and bright using the same color. The inside, not the inside of the lighthouse, the inside of where the light is housed. Now I'm also going to put this bright color on this side of the lighthouse. The reason for doing these outlines of this really bright hue is because the lighthouse is lit from behind. So that's perfect, because when you have a strong vertical in a painting like this, it's really great if it's dark. The verticals are usually dark and horizontals are lighter. And so this lighting situation is perfect because we don't have to make anything up. It is that way. So I'm bringing a little bit of the light underneath here. Now I'm going to grab some cyan and I'm going to put some blue, mixing it with a little of that dark. I'm going to put a little bit of blue on this section of the lighthouse. Okay, I'm going to zoom in now for you. I'm still going to put a few more small details. I've mixed up a nice lavender with magenta and cyan and white. And I'm just going to make a couple of streaks on the outside edges of the lighthouse, still using my number 2 brush. And just to give it a little more dimension. You'll notice sometimes when you paint with gouache, when you're painting one color over another, that it seems to absorb it and looks a little chalky. But you have to give it a chance to dry. And then it should look better to you. I'm also going to add a bit of this blue color inside of here. Just looks a little too dark to me, and I want to add some color. So I'm just adding some of this blue, and then I'll retouch up the verticals that we put in. And then on the roof, I'm going to add a different color highlight to the middle of that same lavender that I used on the main part of the lighthouse. So it's got brighter lights on the outside and a darker one on the inside. Then I'm going to pick up some titanium white. And I'm going to put some more highlights up here on these railings. I don't want to cover up all the black. I want some of the black showing, but I want to have a couple of highlights. And I'm going to put a really nice one right here on the top where that little round decorative piece is that sticks up. And just further lighten the outer rim of the roof at the very top. Okay, now I'm going to come back and reinforce these. I'm just using that same color. Okay. I'm going to blend here with a little bit of water. Sometimes if you put the light over the dark with gouache, it can end up looking a little bit like scratchboard art if you're not careful. So I end up blending a little bit with water sometimes to kind of calm that down. And that's what I just did. And the roof on the inside here has its own little shape where it sets out, comes out from the lighthouse out here. Okay, so that's good amount of detail for now. The next thing I want to add is just a base color for where the waves are splashing up. So I'm going to go right in here and use the same color mixture, and I'm going to add ultramarine blue to it. So If you're remixing colors, you'll use ultramarine and a tiny bit of magenta and titanium white. And when you create a splashing wave like you see in this picture, you're going to have to layer a few layers of paint. And so that's why this is such a great lesson, because you get to learn how to create splashing wave, how to layer paint, how to do evening colors in the sky, how to paint something realistic like the lighthouse, and water in a wave. There's just quite a bit worked into this lesson. I just realized too that I didn't get this little window here. There's a little window on this side, and I'm just going to put that in just like that. Okay, so filling this in here, and I'm going to let some of that paint splash down over the rocks. And we're just getting that base color filled in. Now to this same color, I'm going to add a little more magenta and titanium white, and still a little more blue. I'm making a violet that's just slightly more pink, and I'm going to start putting in this wave that's rolling in here. And now I'm going to add titanium white to that, so it's really light, and a little more ultramarine blue, and getting a tiny bit of water on my brush. And I'm going to make a few strokes back here behind that wave to catch some of that light, pretty blue rolling surf. So anything that's raised up and a bit vertical is going to appear cool in this composition. And so these waves appear cool because they're a little bit raised up and vertical, and the sun is behind them. And so they appear cool because the sunlight is really a hot yellow. Now I'm going to take that same lighter color, and this wave is going to need layering too. So I'm going to bring some of this color down in here, and I'm also going to put some of it in between the turquoise color of the water in front. So I'm going to get a little more water and add some more white and a little more blue. I'm using cyan and ultramarine. So just ultramarine in the crashing wave and a bit of cyan in the blue in this section. And I'm filling in here, I'm leaving the turquoise as much as I can, and where there's white in between the turquoise, I'm putting some of this pretty violet color. And I'm making the same kind of brush strokes that I made for the waves, but instead of using the flat, sorry, not the waves, the turquoise, instead of using the flat side of my brush, I'm using the skinny side, but it's the same brush. All right, I just changed my water, cleaned the palette. I'm going to mix titanium white and cadmium lemon. I'm going to mix a fair amount of paint. So these strokes of paint are not going to, I'm not going to have very much water on my brush. So I'm actually going to take the water off by touching the back of my brush where the hairs meet the metal, not the outside. So I want to have a lot of pigment on the outside, but not a lot of water. And that's because I'm going to be using the texture of the paper and make a very kind of a dry brush stroke. Oh, I still have too much water. There we go. So if you make the first couple of strokes and you think they're too streaky looking, not to worry. We're going to layer over these also. So you see how it's dry and picking up some of the texture of the paper? So when I drag the brush over it, the texture, if I drag it over light enough, the texture picks up a little bit of paint. And where there are tiny depressions in the paper, the paint doesn't get in there. Now I'm going to get some bright white, titanium white. And I'm going to put that, I'm going to follow the sun down and put that right here in the middle. And once again, using very little water. I'm going to come right up against the rocks. And now I'm going to get some deep yellow. Okay, and I'm going to put some streaks of that out here. So I'm layering the warm yellow over the cool, and both yellows are mixed with white. And I'm leaving the white in the middle, and I'm painting around it a bit. I'm going to zoom in so you can see how this looks up close. Now I'm going to mix up some more of the lemon yellow and titanium white. And I'm going to put some of that right back here behind the wave. And that will really push that wave forward, really add to the contrast. I'm adding some more white to it. It's a little too yellow. I needed to have a little more white mixed in. So just putting some of that right behind this wave. And right behind these rocks. And we're going to put a few dots of that down in here. This pretty lemon yellow and white mixture. Just like that. And I think I'll put another one out here. Smooth that out a little bit. Break it up. Okay. So I'm going to mix ultramarine blue and lilac, and I'll add some magenta. You could also add magenta and ultramarine blue and titanium white and come out with the same color. And I want to have the motion of the highlights of the rocks going top to bottom and spreading out, because I've got the motion of the sky fanning out towards the top. So it's sort of like these rocks are splashed and they've gotten wet, and so this purple color sort of represents where they're slick and shiny looking. So bringing the brush strokes sort of from the center out. And trying to make my brush strokes expressive and have some movement, some character. What I don't want you to do is try to outline a rock. Okay, now I'm going to mix black Intenso with this color and add some magenta and some vermilion and a tiny amount of titanium white. And I'm trying to get a real nice deep dark pink mixture. And I'm going to put that right here and bring it up over the water where the water's reflecting the light. And I want to let some of my yellow splashes come in down into the rocks, and then others I want them to get pushed behind the rocks. Now I like this warm pink color, this pinkish black. I think it's much more interesting than just having plain black. And I'm going to bring this rock down here. It got a little lost under my wave. Bring that down towards the bottom. So I'm layering the light over the dark. Now I'm going back in with some darks and putting the darks over the light. So it's a real back and forth process that we use with gouache. Very different from watercolor, even though they're both water media. And the look of it is so different from oils. It's really amazing. Okay. I'm going to get some more of this light lilac color here. I'm going to bring just a little more splash down around this door. So this is the lilac mixed with the black mixture, just giving it a little further texture. Now I'm going to pick up some ultramarine blue, and I've mixed it with this dark mixture, making a real dark blue. I'm just going to put a few strokes of that. It's never too simple with colors. Got to have a nice variety. Now I want to start layering some colors over the wave, the splashing wave. So I'm going to use titanium white. I'm going to let it mix in with some of that dark mixture. I wipe most of it up. I don't want it to be too bright, so that just grays it down a bit. And I'm going to make these sort of light. You can see how I'm moving my brush back and forth. Whenever you get a new brush, you should make sure you spend some time with it and experiment with making different kinds of brush strokes. I'm going to bring a couple of these splashes right up here into the sky, really small dots of them. And I'm going to come over here to this side, and I'll have a couple of splashes around here too, just to kind of tie that color in and make it look like the wave is wrapped around the lighthouse, splashing both sides of it. And now I'm also going to use some of that color plus some cyan and some ultramarine, and I'm going to make a few strokes within the turquoise here, this blue. So a little too much turquoise showing. Now I'm going to get some of this nice warm yellow that I left on my palette, which is already dry, so I'm re-wetting it, and I'm going to add some vermilion to it. And I'm going to add just some hints of that pretty tinted orangish color into the water in the foreground. just like that. And I think I'll put a little of that out here also. Get the rest of that reddish colored water covered up. I'm going to come back in here and work in a few more lighter whitish. This is white mixed with a tiny amount of ultramarine blue, and I just want to get this third layer. So value creates dimension. So we started with the dark base, and then we're layering over it with just slightly lighter and lighter splashes. Like that. Now I'm going to mix the turquoise and the ultramarine and paint that in here. So I've got two values now. I've got the turquoise that's darker, and then I've got some of this nice lighter color in here. Just want to have a lot of movement, which means I've got to put quite a few brush strokes in. And I'm keeping it dark right next to the rocks, because the rocks here give this a little shadow. Now I'm going back to the ultramarine, and I'm going to mix it with some Madder Lake. And underneath the wave, it's very dark. So I'm making this a really dark violet. That's not dark enough. So ultramarine and Madder Lake again, really dark under here. When you paint water, you end up having to layer a lot. But that's what water does. Water is kind of a layered thing. So that method really lends itself to getting water to look realistic. I'm going to put some of that dark color over here on the rocks, just to blend the edges of where the turquoise comes up close to the rocks. And a few dark strokes of that in the shadow area here. So when you get to this point in your painting, it's a good idea to stand up if you're sitting down, or just kind of get back from it and squint down a little bit and just assess where you are with it. And maybe you want to keep going, and maybe you want to stop, but I think we still have quite a few more things to do here. So I'm going to go back to this gray blue color. I'm going to mix ultramarine blue and white, and I'm going to add some of that pretty blue in between the light violet and the really dark color, just to kind of give a nice transition and make it look like it's rolling over. And now more titanium white. I'm going to put that right in the top here. There we are. And I'll also put some of that color in this crashing wave. I'm going to get some black intenso and cyan and put a few more even darker darks right under the bottom of this wave. A lot of times when you're near the finishing stages of a painting, you end up with a lot of the painting being in kind of a mid-tone range where you have lots of middle values and your highlights and your darks aren't emphasized enough. But this painting is a different approach. We've got the really dark black rocks of the lighthouse under the lighthouse, and we've got the bright white sun. So we're gauging everything around those dark darks and light lights. Now I've been darkening that area here in the front, and now I'm going to add some lights. So going for, I've got to squeeze out some more white. So titanium white and a bit of lemon yellow. I've added some more white again to my palette. All right, now I'm picking up some medium yellow, and I'm going to paint that, a few brush strokes of that in here too. So we put the dark, we put the light, and these brush strokes of the light are thinner, and I'm using my number 2 brush and making really thin brush strokes of this light color. Now I'm adding more titanium white to that, and I'm going to add some brush strokes like this. So these are vertical brush strokes, just really picking up that light, and each one of these is surrounded by a slightly darker color, and I'm going to put a few of those out here also. You know how sometimes when you look at the water, there's extra sparkles out there? You just kind of take a round brush and make a little vertical mark like that, and it gives it some sparkle. But you definitely don't want to overdo it. I really like how these lights look right next to the dark rocks. And I'm going to go over this. I feel like this white in the middle is a bit too white, so I'm just painting that light color over it. That looks better to me. I'm going to go around the sun also. Just fine tuning and fine tuning. I'm going to put a couple of those little sparkle marks back here too, kind of up against the shoreline. Outline the edge of the lighthouse. I think I'm going to emphasize that a bit more also. And we'll put a couple of those dots right in here. I'm also going to put the same color and highlight the little round decoration on the roof here, just because I like how that looks with a yellow highlight on it. I'm going to do one final thing, which is I'm going to put a little bit of this pretty violet back in here. I put too much of that deep violet, ultramarine, and magenta, and I just need to put some of this lighter color back in here, just a couple places. There. And I'll add a couple places in here. One of the things that I really like about how this turned out is the beautiful transition from the highlights into the violet blue and then into the turquoise blue. Moving into the rocks here, that turned out really great. And one other thing I think I should do is tone this orange, put another layer over it with some pink and red and titanium white. Looks a little unfinished, like it could use another layer. And I'll put some of it over here also. This one, a little more movement in my sky. I also like to show you how I sign my paintings. So I use black intenso, ultramarine and magenta. And I use my number 0 brush, and I just carefully sign my name with paint. Some people like to sign their name with pencil, but to me it doesn't show up well enough. And if you sign it with ink, it may not be as permanent. If you don't like signing your name, you can also just sign with initials. Okay, thanks so much for painting the Santa Cruz Lighthouse with me. If you enjoyed the video that you just watched on my YouTube channel, please like and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming future videos.